All right, welcome everybody to another exciting episode of Under the Dome. I'm your host, Alan Ulrich, here with Bob Rose. How you doing tonight, Bob?
Freezing my ass off again. But when we went on air, it was 7 degrees here, and
Oh my
I have
God.
no idea what the wind chill was, but I promise you, it's in negative digits. So yeah, we're struggling to keep warm up here again. But other than that, from the sports media side of things, chaotically busy.
Yeah, so here's the thing, and I wanted to talk a little bit about this before we really got into the show. I've been watching a lot of pro football talk, Mike Florio and Chris Sims, and they both have said something that was one of the rare things that they said that actually made sense. They were talking about Kellen Moore and his hire, and we're going to get into the assistants and the problems with the assistants because so many other teams have already hired their coach. Mm-hmm. And they said it really penalizes a team like the Saints that did their due diligence, wanted a guy from the Super Bowl team, and couldn't talk to him or hire him theoretically until after the Super Bowl had already happened. And Chris Sims says he thinks that there should be a rule that no team could hire a coach until after the Super Bowl, because he said, and this was his dig at the Saints, the way I heard it, that, Kellen Moore went on a hot streak here. He probably would have been a hotter name had teams not already made their decision to hire somebody to make it a little more interesting. And Florio was talking about, well, no, Ben Johnson already pretty much decided he was going to the Bears because it was the same division. He knew the division. The Bears have a young quarterback in place. Aaron Glenn wanted to go to the Jets because that was a dream job for him, and so on. So it's one of those things that they throw this stuff out there, but there was a gem in there that actually somewhat made sense. And it goes back to the fact that when these rules were put in place, the Super Bowl was played around January 15th. Mm-hmm. So the season was over with by the middle of January. That's before the Senior Bowl, all that stuff. So coaches had plenty of time to get the assistants and get the staff members they wanted, pick through the candidates they wanted, and put together a good staff before the offseason really got underway. Now the Saints are on a compressed time schedule. The combine is next weekend. Yep. So they got to have people there. And I get it. The assistant coaches, not too many of them go, but still you want people in place so you know what kind of defense and offense you're running. You kind of have people, you want to have your stuff in place before they kick into, okay, here we go. It's the combine. Then we're going to pro day. Then we're preparing for we get free agency. Then we're preparing for the draft after that. So, it's just, it's because the Saints are kind of behind almost by a month compared to everyone else. They're still trying to get their staff together. So it's one of the few things they said that I'm like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. I kind of like that, extend it a little bit. So teams all on the same page, at least, or at the same pace, trying to get all this stuff together, because the league's going to keep pushing. We've got 18 games. We're going to have the Super Bowl after Valentine's Day. I mean, that's what you're going to have. A whole month compared to when I was a kid and when you were a kid, the playoffs were going on during Christmas, and immediately after Christmas. I would be taking my Christmas tree down during the divisional round of the playoffs. Now the season is ending around the time you take your tree down. So just something that's going on that caught my eye. So let's talk about the assistant coaches he has hired, because he's got the offensive staff in place. The news today, Doug Nussmeier is officially the offensive coordinator.
Officially, not unofficially, officially, but yeah.
Yeah. They've hired him for a role.
Yep.
the Saints have brought back several names that people probably don't remember them being part of the Saints staff. The running backs coach, I used to always see him, Thomas. I used to
Mm-hmm.
always see him whenever they showed Sean Payton. There's a guy, there's the black guy with the bald head and the beard with the arms folded. Every time, there he is, right back there. Him and the white hair old man always remind me of Pete Finney. He's one of the chain gang people that used to walk around back there, and I would see him. Those are the two faces I would always see for 16 years. Every time they showed Sean Payton, there he is. So let's talk about Doug Nussmeier first, and then we'll get into the assistants. What do you think Doug Nussmeier brings to the Saints?
I like Doug as a coach. I like Doug as a person. He's basically followed Kellen Moore since 2018. He was with Kellen for Kellen's entire duration in Dallas, 2018 through 2022. Then when Kellen went to the Chargers, Nussmeier landed with the Chargers, and then of course Nussmeier and Moore were together with the Eagles last year. Doug knows his quarterbacks. You can't deny the talent and the development that Dak Prescott showed with the Dallas Cowboys. You could poke fun at the franchise or even Dak personally all you want, but he's a talented guy. And he developed primarily because of Kellen Moore, Doug Nussmeier, and Scott Tolzien, who we'll get into in a little bit. And just like what I said with Kellen, what has impressed me about Doug's coaching style is that he is been able to maximize the abilities of his star players. B, they've been able to, the duo, has been able to develop complementary talent. And C, that their system, that their style has been adaptable to the top talents of their best players. And make no mistake, when Doug Nussmeier is officially hired, which we expect to come sometime overnight or first thing in the morning, he's going to have an offensive coordinator title in name. Probably be slapped with a senior assistant role to make him make it easier to poach away from the Eagles. But Kellen Moore is the de facto offensive coordinator. It's much like a Sean Payton, Pete Carmichael relationship here. Now I'm not going to call Doug Nussmeier a puppet by any means. He's still going to be an important part of putting together, the weekly game plans. Probably just alongside Tolzien, probably take an instrumental role, in coaching the quarterback position, whoever that happens to be. And I remember saying on your show and our show last week, don't automatically assume that Doug Nussmeier is going to be with the New Orleans Saints, because I expected the Philadelphia Eagles to make a hard push to keep him. And Jordy Holberg and I talked about this morning. I expressed surprise that I have heard nothing out of the Philadelphia organization about efforts to keep Nussmeier on the staff. I thought for sure they'd at least make a push to promote him in Kellen Moore's place, but I haven't heard anything, which makes me think more and more that Doug Nussmeier is the offensive coordinator for the New Orleans Saints.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, because the other guy that they're poaching from the Eagles, TJ, all right, not TJ Who's Your Mama, but TJ. I want to make sure I'm not confusing with the character from The Godfather 2. Paganetti. See, I knew I was going to confuse the two names.
It's okay.
But he was the run game coordinator and assistant offensive line coach. To me, that's a bigger name to be pulling from the Eagles staff, because you would think, okay, it's pretty obvious, give the ball to Saquon. But it's more than just give the ball to Saquon as a running game coordinator, because you're working with this offensive line. You are making sure they can open the holes up to get him on the outside, get him inside, help get him to the second level, and most of all, that tush push playing. All these things that, to me, it signals that this offensive line is going to be very different, and maybe in ways that we thought it should have been prior to Dennis Allen coming on board with the inside and outside zone running game. Let's talk a little bit about him because, the Eagles, he will probably become the offensive line coach for the Saints. So he will get a promotion in order to pull him from the Eagles. What do you think he brings to the table?
I mean, a lot. You just look at how the Philadelphia Eagles offensive line, you talked about the run blocking. They were one of the better pass protection units in the NFL too over the last 3, 4, 5 years, which is how long, TJ's been with them. Now, his title with Philadelphia, as you said, was assistant offensive line coach. Well, that's because, John Stoutland has been with Philadelphia for 23 years.
Yeah.
And, I remember, Saints fans talking, the week of the Super Bowl when it was kind of assumed that Kellen Moore was going to be the guy. Hey, we'd love to get this guy from the Eagles and we'd love to get that guy from the Eagles. Well, one of the guys was, the offensive line coach. And I'm like, he ain't going anywhere. But the guy to watch is his assistant, which turned out to be the guy that that the Saints got. And he's a young guy too. He's only 35 years old. So there's a big future there. He gets out from underneath of Stoutland's shadow, with a chance to coach and develop his own offensive line now, his own running game, et cetera, with a lot of the same concepts. Bringing over a lot of the same concepts that Philadelphia had, and everybody wants to focus on Saquon Barkley and his 2,000 yards this year, and why wouldn't you? But remember, this is an Eagles running game that has been near the top of the league in production for the last 4 or 5 years. 2 years prior, when they went to the Super Bowl, they were number 1 in the league in rushing. The year before that, remember back-to-back years when the Saints still had a good run defense. The Eagles rushed for over 250 yards on them in back-to-back years and did so with ease. That's what kind of system that you're looking at, folks. A very physical, downhill zone blocking running scheme, which, oh, by the way, fits right into the skill set of Trevor Penning. So, not to mention Talise Fuaga. Now, I'm with you. Eric McCoy fits that scheme well too. I'm interested to see how Cesar Ruiz is going to fit. And we know that the Saints are going to go hard at finding a new starting left guard. That's going to be right in the wheelhouse of a guy like TJ, and Kellen and Nussmeier, assuming he's the guy, because they had some pretty damn good offensive lines, when they worked together in Dallas as well.
And for those of you who may not remember this, the first time I saw Doug Nussmeier's name as a coach was back in 2012 with Alabama. You know who the running back was in 2012 with Alabama? Big back named Derek Henry. To me, it also tips off kind of where the Saints probably will go in the draft. I mean, people are saying Jackson Dart and Milrow and all kinds of, trading up for Cam Ward, all these sort of moves. I think we're going to see running backs come off the board and come to the Saints. And yes, that includes Genty, but, don't sleep on the Ohio State running back tandem that was, and that's somebody probably in the 3rd round you could look at if you go, say, offensive line, maybe an offensive guard at 40. So to me, these hires are kind of dictating what this. I saw your question just as I was talking, Hemisphere. Yeah, I don't know if they go tackle at number 9 because. I know a lot of people want to get that kid from LSU in at left tackle and move Fuaga back to the right side. I don't know if they're going to do that because that's 3 people to move because Penning the guard. I think they probably look at guard first and then figure out maybe a tackle they can convert to guard and not at 9. I think they're going to go skill position or defense at 9. But
I think I agree with you. I think either best available offensive skill position. Genty and Tyler Warren come to mind, or game-changing edge rusher. The two kids from Georgia, the kid from Marshall, James Pierce from Tennessee. That's four guys. At least three of them are still going to be on the board if they stay at 9.
Yeah, and we only know the offensive pieces so far. We don't know who the defensive coordinator is. Yeah, Brandon Staley seems to be the number one name in the wheelhouse. We've been saying that for a couple of weeks, but that could change. I've seen different names come up as possibilities for defensive coordinators, people they've reached out to try and get as maybe be defensive coordinator. But the scheme fit is what I'm worried about. If they go to more of a 3-4 kind of defense, that kind of dictates you may need several people to come in. I think defensive end is probably at the top of the leaderboard because you probably can't afford to bring back Chase Young unless his market is absolutely dead, and he has to come back on a cheaper deal. Other than that, I just can't imagine him coming back. But regardless, you're still looking at, we need to bring in more defensive tackles, more defensive ends, bring in some speed on this defense. So,
well, Alan, and you just hit on something that I'm going to be writing an article about once the defensive coordinator is official. Most of us do expect Brandon Staley to be the guy. If it's not the other guy, they interviewed two other guys, but the other prominent name that sticks out is Christian Parker, the defensive backs coach for the Eagles. Well, both of these guys are Vic Fangio disciples. Vic Fangio runs what? A hybrid 3-4. So even if you do re-sign Chase Young, Cam Jordan's 35 years old, kind of out of position. Yeah, even in his prime, he's kind of out of position for a 3-4. Carl Granderson, my opinion, is not a fit for a 3-4. So even if you re-sign Chase Young, I think an edge, an athletic edge guy, is still very much in play at number 9.
Yeah, and I kind of lit a bomb and just walked away the other day on Twitter because I suggested that the Saints could trade Chris Olave for picks to try and get, say, a 2 and a 4. Some people saying a 1. I'm just like, no, with his concussion history, no one's going to give up a 1. The days of giving up a 1 for a Brandon Cooks are gone. But if you can get multiple picks for him, that's a possibility. Only because, and I'm saying this as a possibility, only because if you're looking at a 2 to 3 year rebuild job, you're looking at having to pay Olave in a couple of years, or at least pick up his 5th year option. He's entering year 4 right now. This is the time, if you're going to move him, this is the time to move him.
It is.
And I just feel like if you're trying to recoup the cap, and people saying, well, he's already on a rookie deal, you don't have to worry about that. If you're trying to rebuild your cap, if you're trying to get more picks, more players, that's the time when you finally you should move him. And I'm saying him over Rashid Shaheed because I think Rashid Shaheed's probably a cheaper player when it comes time to renew his contract. Compared to a former first-round pick in Olave, because he's going to look around and say, I deserve a deal like I'm trying to think of some guys that are out there have big contracts. It used to be just DeAndre Hopkins, but he doesn't have that contract anymore.
Right.
But
Tyreek Hill.
Justin Jefferson's kind of deal, Justin Jefferson's deal. That's the kind of stuff. And he's not that kind of player. So send him to a team, maybe like the Chiefs, maybe like the Ravens or the Bills, maybe someone like that, or Green Bay even, where you can recoup some picks for him because you need the picks. You need the players. It's time to start flipping some of these guys for picks. One of the things, and it's interesting, It's possible. Offensive tackle. The problem is if it's not the LSU guy, Saints fans will be mad. Uh, you know, and I don't know if it'll be that guy. But one of the other things that came up, again, this is Pro Football Talk. This is some of the other rumor mills, going for clicks, saying things like, well, the Saints could move off of Derek Carr, and that could be a landing spot for Aaron Rodgers. Or, I knew that would get you. The Saints are going to release Taysom Hill to save $10 million, which is not true. That's not how this works. No. He costs you $17 million if you release him. You get $10 million back if you make him a post-June 1st cut, but you have to make room for $17 million because you're releasing him early with the post-June 1st designation. So when you release him, you're only getting $227,000 or something like that. And his contract expires in 2027 anyway. So you just redid his deal for that very reason.
Yep.
So you don't really save that much. Yeah, I know. A lot of people. I don't see Aaron Rodgers coming to the Saints, honestly, because he just went through this with the Jets. Why is he going to go to the Saints and just show yet another year where he should have retired a year early? No, he's going to want to go to somebody who's a contender. He's going to want to go to, I don't know, I'm trying to think of some teams that are quarterback needy that, people want to send him to the Vikings to complete the Brett Favre parallelism. But, I could see him going to, I don't know.
I don't see a market for Rodgers. I really don't.
I mean, Cleveland, maybe.
That
because you got to do something. Deshaun Watson just ripped his Achilles again, so he's not going to play. So they can be looking for a quarterback. The Steelers, maybe.
No, you're good. The Steelers I could see as a stretch. Tomlin has always spoke glowingly of Rodgers, but you have to look at it this way too, from Kellen Moore's perspective. I'm a new coach. I'm a first-time coach.
Mm-hmm.
Why the hell would I want that drama and that narcissism and that cancer in my locker room? So that even if Rodgers still could play a little bit, it ain't going to happen.
Right. I mean, you just, like I said, you just went through all this in New York. You got to bring in his receivers, and you got to bring in, his offensive coordinator, and you got to bring in all the stuff that he demands. No, it's a complete waste of time and effort to bring in Aaron Rodgers. But again, that's Pro Football Talk.
Yeah.
I mean, Mike Florio's beating the Jon Gruden, the offensive coordinator, to the Saints drum for a while too. And I'm like, where's the relationship between Moore and Gruden? Why would Gruden come over here, and how is that going to rehabilitate his reputation to get him back in the league? It was silly, but he was beating that drum ever since the Super Bowl. So no, that's not happening. And the funny thing, Jerry, is let's not even talk about drama problems. This is the issue I said last week. You're already paying for Carr. If you trade or cut him this year, you still take a salary cap hit anywhere from $30 to $50 million. Where's this money going to come from to pay for a guy like Rodgers? Because Rodgers isn't going to go, yeah, you know what? I'm going to take the league minimum. I've made enough money. This is not going to happen. Rodgers is going to say, this is how much I'm worth as a starting quarterback, future Hall of Famer. He's not going to take less money. The guy you're getting, if you get rid of Carr, is you're getting somebody cheap, somebody who's kind of like, Andy Dalton, who just signed a new deal,
Hmm.
2-year deal with the Panthers, and it's like 2 years, $10 million, $6 million guaranteed. That's pretty much a backup contract. If anything, I threw this out there. If you're going to blow up the whole quarterback room, and um, you're convinced you're going to draft a guy, whether it's Jackson Dart, Milrow, Will Howard, just pick your quarterback. Okay. You're going to sign maybe an aging vet like a Russell Wilson, for example, who may agree to a contract similar to Andy Dalton. I mean, he's still getting paid from the damn
Yeah. Yeah.
Broncos. So,
Seahawks too, I think.
See, this happened to Archie Manning. I got the 1981 Saints highlights playing behind me right now. This actually happened to Archie Manning. You can't do this anymore. Archie signs a deal with the Saints in 1981 that paid him like $500,000. This is 1980 and way before free agency, but it was like a 5-year, $500,000 contract or something to that effect. Manning gets traded to the Oilers. The Saints are still paying Manning. Manning signs a contract with the Oilers. The Oilers are paying Manning. Then Manning gets traded to the Vikings in 1983 because Tommy Kramer gets injured, but unfortunately, Archie developed a thyroid condition and was unable to play the whole time. So he was getting paid from 3 different franchises, and they said, no. You can't do this anymore. No, we can't have players getting paid from 3 different franchises. Pete Rozelle made a rule. The contracts roll over to whatever franchise has your rights now. That's the only team that's paying you, but that's just the way it was. It's just Russell Wilson, if he would say, I'm going to take a league minimum deal, I can see that happening. But for the most part, you're not going to really see. I just can't see too many quarterbacks out there. I mean, yeah, I know some people want to bring Jameis Winston back. I just can't see them going backwards because you're paying for Jameis Winston. He's part of your dead money that you've got right now because of the way you structured his contract.
Mm-hmm.
They're still paying $7 million worth on the cap towards Jameis Winston. I can't see them doing that, bringing him back.
Well, I look at it this way, and I've said it before. I think I said it on here before. I totally agree with what you just said financially, that they basically need Carr's contract this year to be able to restructure, to be able to get cap compliant. But Saints fans, I get you hate Derek Carr. I do. I understand it. And I understand most of the reason why. But you look at it schematically. You want to be rid of Carr come hell or high water. But like Alan just said, the Saints are going to be paying Derek Carr whether he's on the roster or not. So think of this logic. You cut bait with Derek Carr, still in possession of his contract, by the way. And then you want to bring in who? Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, Geno Smith, Sam Darnold. There's a couple others. Jimmy Garoppolo, if he hits the market again. Would you take any of those guys? Be real now. Would you take any of those guys over Derek Carr? Kirk Cousins was the other one. And and if you would you die on that hill? Because that's basically what you're setting yourself up to do. What you're doing now is you bring in any of those guys, Wilson, Garoppolo, Cousins, whomever. You bring in any of those guys, you are getting another Derek Carr, but you're now paying double because you're bringing the guy you just brought in to replace the guy that you're still paying. You tell me, what kind of world does that make sense in?
Yeah.
None.
Yeah.
None.
And the money is the hard part because as we've gone through many, many times on this show, the things you would have to do restructuring all the players you have to restructure just to get cap compliant. Plus, the picks that you've got right now, estimated, I read, was about $11 million that you need to have set aside to cover these picks. That's picking at number 9. That's having 9 picks. We don't know if they're going to be any compensatory picks or not. But covering 9 picks is what you've got. So you need to be $11 million under the cap. Then you can't sign anybody because you don't have any money. So, yeah, you're paying $7 million for Jameis. You're paying $9 million for who is it? It's somebody else who's not on the team anymore, and it's not Ramchak. It's $9 million for somebody else.
Lattimore's still on the books.
Lattimore's $31 million. That's the bulk of it. You have to pay $31 million.
Mike Thomas.
Yeah, that's who it is. Michael Thomas. It's $9 million towards Michael Thomas. So that's the dead money. That's not being over the cap. That's just dead money. And here's something that needs to be talked about, I guess, to an extent. Dead money is money that is allocated to in the cap dollars, not actual physical dollars that you're paying people. This is cap dollars. This is when you structured this deal, you said, I'm going to have $9 million of whatever the contract was worth allocated towards the 2025 cap.
Mm-hmm.
Once a player is gone, you can't manipulate that money. That's why it's called dead money. It's just money that's just sitting there like a millstone. So the minute you traded Lattimore, all his guaranteed money, all the things that he was guaranteed in his contract was pushed immediately into 2024 and 2025. They put some of it in 24, the rest of it all in 2025. Now, the good news is that they're all off the books in 2026.
Mm-hmm.
But this is what Kai Hartley and Mickey Loomis do to be cap compliant. They play with the numbers. It's like taking your house note and you're kind of playing with numbers so you can reduce your house note in months that you don't have much money, and you're pushing the bulk of the money to the end of your note. You're thinking 30 years from now, what does it matter? I should have more money by then, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So you're willing to put a balloon note at the end of your house note just so you have a lower monthly payment that month. I mean, that's basically what you're doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just, so this is when they restructure deals. That's basically what they're doing. They're moving the cap number out further years, and they have to do that to be cap compliant. And the players agree to it because what Gail does is she cuts them a check and they get the money right then. That's why they want to do it. So it's like, okay, your pay this year is going to be, let's say your game check is going to be $200 and something thousand for 17 weeks. Okay. You get bonuses for signing this deal. You get bonuses for performance. You get bonuses for workouts, whatever it is. We'll take all that money and give it to you in one lump sum. Here you go. Here's a check for it. Have fun. Merry Christmas. And by us doing that, now we can take this bonus, because we converted it all to bonus, and spread it out over the length of the contract. The Saints love that because now you've reduced the person's cap figure from, say, $10 million to $220,000 because you converted it to bonuses and you pushed the difference out over the rest of the contract. That's what a restructure is. That's what the Saints have been doing since Mickey Loomis has been around and Kai Hartley have been around. This is how they're able to keep the players they've been able to keep.
Mm-hmm.
Now that bill is coming due because, number one, our players have gotten older. These plans work as long as those players are productive.
Right.
You know? When they're no longer productive, you're gambling on that. That's what's going to be. That's going to be, I know. But that's going to be um, a useful tool because it allows you to keep as many players as possible.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they were so much in favor of it. But now the other thing has to happen for this plan to really work is you have to draft well.
Yeah.
Because you want players to slowly replace those older players. So then you have to keep restructuring the deals. You can let those deals go by the wayside. That didn't happen either. So we're caught in a squeeze. We're caught in, you've got older players that you've had to give 3 and 4 contracts to, and you haven't brought in enough good players to surpass those guys. So now those contracts keep coming up again and again and again. So that's the problem they're in with not just Derek Carr, with everybody. Taysom Hill, Cam Jordan, Demario Davis, Tyrann Mathieu. Just go down the list. Plus, you want to be able to pay a guy like Paulson Adebo, because that's one of your young pieces. A guy like, this goes back to what we started the conversation on, Chris Olave is going to want to get paid. He's going to want to be paid like one of the top receivers. He's like, I'm your number one guy. I'm your guy that you are counting on to make your passing game go. You need to pay me accordingly. Because these guys aren't going, oh, you're under the cap? Oh, man, what can I do to help? I'll take a pay cut. That's not how the real world works. It's like Jerry Seinfeld. Oh, that's a shame. That's too bad. Where's my check? I mean, that's just the way it works. So these are the decisions you have to make, and that's why it's so important that you draft well, because then you can say, like we did with Brandon Cooks, yeah, too bad. You're out of here. We got Michael Thomas. We're going to pay that guy. We're not paying you. You're a 1,000-yard receiver, and you probably get 7 or 8 touchdowns each year, but you know what? We can't pay both of you, so hasta la vista, baby. And that should happen at most positions. That just didn't happen. It hasn't been happening. So anyway, that's my long rant on the salary cap. Bob, talk about some of the other guys. The Saints brought back Ted Nugent. I'm sorry. They brought back, is it Brian Nugent?
Brendan Nugent.
I couldn't remember. I really couldn't remember his first name, so that's why I said Ted Nugent. I just remember it was Nugent. But offensive line coach, he had been here before. Really well liked, really respected. The Saints have moved on from him even before Dennis Allen was hired. So him coming back, what does that say about the Saints?
Well, I mean, first of all, Nugent did work with Kellen Moore in San Diego, with the Chargers too. So there is a relationship there, but our Brendan Boylan, kind of made a tongue-in-cheek joke about Nugent, and now Joel Thomas is coming back too, the running back coach, and Keith Williams from last year's staff. Oh, so do I. But we just can't get rid of the ghost of Sean Payton. A full exorcism has not happened. And John Hendricks and I talked about this morning. I said, and this was before JT was brought back. But Keith Williams being retained, Brendan Nugent coming back. This stinks of Mickey Loomis. It does. It stinks of Mickey Loomis, and I'm not necessarily meaning that in a bad way this time, because Nugent was part of this staff from 2015 until I think Peyton's last year, 2021. Him being brought back now to coach the offensive line, folks. The Saints had a pretty darn good offensive line from like 2015 through 2020. Now, obviously, a lot of that has to be given credit to the players, but the coaches have something to do with that too. So, I'm kind of excited about it. And all these guys, I don't remember how old Keith Williams is, but I know he's a younger guy. But Brendan Nugent, 41. Paganetti, 35. Scott Tolzien, the new quarterback coach, 37. Chase Hazlitt, the tight end coach, 32. And we know how young Kellen Moore is, 36. So
Yeah.
this is a young staff, folks. You're not getting any retreads, which is the last thing all you guys said that you wanted. Hey, we don't want retreads. We want new blood. Well, you're getting new blood. You're getting guys, that are not only young, but either first time or inexperienced in the roles that they're being brought in to do. I like the Nugent Paganetti combination. Up front for the offensive line. Keith Williams, let's wait and see about him. Because after Olave and Shaheed went down, there was absolutely nothing in the receiving core. So that's not a good look for the coach. But bringing Joel Thomas back, man, I'm with you. I love Joel, but that also tells me how dysfunctional everything in the building was under Dennis Allen. Joel Thomas left last year to accept a lateral move to the New York Giants.
Yeah.
The New York Giants, who had just willingly let Saquon Barkley walk right out of the building. Joel Thomas left for that. Now Dennis Allen is gone, and Joel says, okay, guys, I'll come back. I'm surprised more people haven't said, this is a move indicative of how just off kilter the Dennis Allen era was.
Yeah. There's a lot that's going to be coming out over the next year or so, I think, about what was going on with Dennis Allen. Liam Cohn was somebody that Dennis Allen was trying to get as new offensive coordinator, and he had there was some kind of issue. I can't think of exactly how it was phrased, but basically they wanted to keep Pete Carmichael around and make Liam Cohn the offensive coordinator. We can't do that.
No.
That's not how it's going to work. You have to let him be the offensive coordinator. You can't have two masters. Part of the problem with the 1980 Saints, this is going way off topic, but I'll keep this short. Part of the problem with the 1980 Saints is basically to fulfill a promise that John Meekum made to the late Los Angeles Rams owner, Cal Rosenblum. He said, take care of my son, Steve, if anything happens to me. There's Meekum right there. Just like I summoned him. Meekum went ahead and brought him in as GM. Well, the problem was Dick Nolan, the head coach, was head coach and GM. You did that in 1978 when you signed him to that contract. You put him as head coach and GM. So now Meekum tries some kind of Solomon deal where I'm going to split the power between Nolan and Rosenblum just to give him something to do. And now you have two masters. You have two guys in there and nobody knows who to go to. Whose job is whose. And that's what would happen if you would have had Liam Cohn and Pete Carmichael in the same building. So Cohn didn't come to the Saints. He went to Tampa instead. It's just that kind of stuff. I think will come out more and more. That will come out now that Allen is gone, which makes him an even worse hire because those are the issues he had in Oakland. So it really makes it look bad that they hired that guy because you should have learned your lessons from Oakland. I assumed you did.
I did assumed
too. That, I was defending the man because Oakland's a disaster. The Raiders are a disaster. They're still a disaster after he was gone. But, he apparently didn't know any better or didn't fix those mistakes that he made. So it makes it even worse. He should have never been a head coach. But it does speak volumes. And there's a lot of, when people really rip into Gail Benson talking about how bad of an owner she is, I'm like, boys, That's
You
amateur
don't know.
hour. Yeah,
you just
that
don't
clown,
know.
that clown there that was running that organization for 19 years, that was a disaster. I mean, you know, you don't like Mickey Loomis. At least Benson didn't hire an astronaut to be a GM. Yeah. And the astronaut at his opening press conference asking the media for ideas because he didn't know what to do. Who does this? And then make him at the end of the season defending the decision to do this. Dick Gordon's the guy's name. Defending the decision, saying, well, the league has changed. The way football is done has changed. You don't really need a football man to be in charge of your organization anymore. It's more of a business. You need a businessman in charge. Yeah. Take a good look at the Saints drafts from 1970 to 1980.
Oh, it's ugly.
And compare it to the Cowboys or the Steelers. Just for shits and giggles. The Dirty Dozen from the Cowboys to 75. The 4 Hall of Famers, the greatest draft class in the history of pro football for the Steelers in 74. Yeah, not even close. Not even close.
Yep. The only thing you can say is thank God for Hank Stram and his desire to draft the running backs back to back with Muncie and Galbraith. Yeah. Otherwise, like you said, look at that 10-year stretch and drafts, and you just you either cringe or you go, who? I have never heard of any of these guys, even in the in rounds 1 and 2.
Oh, there's two moves, the 73 draft and the 74 draft that I remember. I think it was the 75 draft, 73 and 75. 73, Burt Jones from LSU is on the clock. The Saints have Archie Manning, so they're not going to draft. That's not Pat Swilling, by the way. That's Dennis Dirt Winston, number 56. Mm-hmm. Just pointing that out. Anyway,
I assume because I saw Bum Phillips before that, so I did the math.
86.
Yeah,
but that was Dennis Dirt Winston from the Steelers. Mm-hmm. That was Ricky Jackson, 57. That's mm-hmm. Sterling Moore, 74. But so the Saints have, I think, the number 2 pick or number 3 pick, something like that. I think number 2 pick. I think they lost the coin toss, and they didn't need a quarterback. But the Colts had just traded Johnny Unitas to the Chargers because he was old, and Joe Thomas, who was the GM, was looking for a new quarterback. So he wanted Burt Jones. Now, you're the Saints. You just fired your coach in preseason, J.D. Roberts. You have a coach now, John North, that you promoted to be the regular coach. If you have the number 2 overall pick, you're going to want to trade down and get as many picks as possible so you can rebuild this team. That's not what the Saints did.
Nope.
The Saints gave the Colts their first-round pick for a defensive end named Billy Newsome, who lasted 1 year with the Saints, by the way. Didn't even get the first-round pick that the Colts had already.
Nope.
From the Colts. Didn't get any other. I think they got a 4th-round pick, which I think they used to get Sterling Moore, who I just pointed out. But got a 4th-round pick and Billy Newsome out of that draft class. That's all they got. Mm-hmm. It's no wonder the Colts were back in the playoffs. 75, 76, 77, the miracle on 33rd Street, I think they called that. Got those three playoff teams with Ted Marshall-Berta, the head coach. I remember those teams. It goes to the post game. That was the last of the Burt Jones Colts mm-hmm. teams. But yeah, they built a playoff team out of the same stupidity. Mm-hmm. 1975. Randy Gradshire, who's going to be an NFL Hall of Famer. I think he was part of the class. I don't remember if he was a part of the class this year. I don't remember who got
last year.
Last year. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, he's on the board. From Ohio State, Mr. All-American. He's got awards as long as my friggin' arm. Who do the Saints pick? Well, they pick a linebacker from Ohio State at number 12 It's his teammate, Rick Middleton, who has no awards. He's not even ranked as a number 1 draft pick. He's a borderline undraftable free agent when they had 17 rounds. Saints take him number 1. The Denver Broncos are like, oh, hell yeah. Jump on Randy. Guess who is part of the Orange Crush, the leader of the Orange Crush defense in 1977 Super Bowl against the Dallas Cowboys in the Super Bowl, in the Superdome? Randy Gradishar. Yep. So when you talk about draft day disasters, you talk about messes that this team has done under bad ownership. It's stunning. And I got 1,000 of these stories because every year draft day was D-Day, doomsday. That's how we looked at it. It's like, how are they going to screw this up? So yeah, the first great one was in 1981. That was the first great draft class. So yeah, I'm very defensive about Gail. She doesn't do everything right. But good God, at least she hires competent people, not total incompetence. My dad was at the game. I was not. I was too little. My first game wasn't for a couple of years yet, but my dad was at that game, and my mom was listening to this game on the radio. A swarm of bees knocked out the transmitter. So everybody at WWL, listening to WWL at the time, got to hear Al Wester say, Dempsey kicks, it's on the way, and then it cuts off. And all you hear is the static. My mom was screaming, almost went into labor with my brother because she was screaming, what happened? What happened? And these days before ESPN and the news, 24 news cycle. So she didn't know anything. She didn't know anything until my dad came home from the game. So yeah, it's unbelievable. So anyway, Bob, I know you got to go real quick. But I wanted to ask you 2 things. Number 1, the Saints hires that are left, defensive positions. We don't have any defensive coaches yet, do we? Okay.
No, none.
All right. So defensive coaches, Brandon Staley is like the leading guy right now as defensive coordinator. Then we'll see linebackers and secondary coaches after that, and defensive line coaches. Special teams. We're not even talking about special teams, but there's been some chatter about bringing back the assistant under Rizzi. Have you heard much more than that?
That's about all I've heard for special teams so far. What's his name? Phil Gagliano.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I couldn't remember his name, but yeah.
If it's not him, then look for a guy like John Fossil, who was a special teams coach in Dallas with Kellen Moore when Kellen Moore was there. And as far as the defensive assistants, whoever the coordinator is going to be, and we do think it's going to be Brandon Staley. The position coaches on defense are going to come real quick after that, and it's going to be all guys that worked with the new defensive coordinator, presumably Brandon Staley. If there's an upset, if it's if it is Christian Parker, who, by the way, guys, I really like too, or a name that you haven't heard, like a George Edwards, the Bucs outside linebacker coach. If it's one of those guys, especially if it's Parker, then there's a bunch of young Philadelphia assistants under Fangio that are going to fill in those positions with promotions, coming over from Philadelphia. But again, we think it's going to be Brandon Staley. Staley's had a lot of different defensive guys work with him, so those position coaches are going to be filled probably within 24 to 36 hours afterward.
Yeah, I would think after this week we'll probably have pretty much the entire coaching staff filled out.
Yeah.
Last question: Bayou Blitz. Is there a Bayou Blitz episode tomorrow night or Wednesday or Thursday night?
Yeah, Brendan and I are back on schedule. We will be on air tomorrow night, Wednesday night, at 8 p.m. Central Time. No guests lined up. We don't want to do them any disservice because there's just so much coaching news to talk about. I expect tomorrow to be as busy as today was, as far as hires go. Only tomorrow I expect it to be, on the defensive side with the probable official announcement of the offensive coordinator.
Good deal. Well, Bob, I'll stick around for a few more minutes. I know you're going to go. He has a Doug Nussmeier piece that he will have out tomorrow
Mm-hmm.
or okay,
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Yeah, unless
So
the hire becomes official tonight, in which case I'm going to pump it out, as soon as it's official. So if you're a night owl, you'll see it pop up on your feed. Otherwise, I will just have it pre-written for tomorrow morning. That's how confident we're going to be that it's going to be Doug Nussmeier.
absolutely. Okay. Well, keep an eye out for it with Athlon Sports. No
Yes.
more Saints News Network. Athlon
No.
Sports, and thanks, Bob. We'll see you next tomorrow. Not tomorrow. We'll see you tomorrow on Bayou Blitz. But we'll see you next week
Yeah.
at Under the Dome.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot, Alan.
No problem.
Night.
Thanks, Bob. Okay, so basically, as Bob brought up, that is the timeline we're looking at. The only other thing I want to talk about this evening is really talking about some of the things that are going on around the league. You guys, I'm sure, have heard about the Justin Tucker following in Deshaun Watson's footsteps with the massages and things like that. 16 players. That's 16 accusers. Sorry. That's the kind of news that seems to follow the Saints a lot. Thank God it's not following the Saints. If of all the criticisms we have had, the worst stories that we had gotten over the past 16 to 20 years with the Saints are things like Marshawn Lattimore accidentally shooting himself, and not accidentally. He had the gun, illegal gun. He was charged with, and then also, the infamous fight in Las Vegas during Pro Bowl week with Alvin Kamara. For the most part, though, we managed to avoid these salacious, bad PR, just horrible people kind of stories that are affecting franchises like the Baltimore Ravens, like the Houston Texans, two playoff teams. That's the best thing you can say for the Saints right now. We're making only coaching moves. We don't have any problems with players right now. That's the good thing. The other thing I wanted to point out to everybody is there's a lot of people talking about tanking, tanking for Arch, tanking for a quarterback in 2026. I hate to tell you this, the Saints are not going to tank. They just sent out season ticket renewals. They went up 15%, I believe, this year. The Saints aren't going to tank. They're going to try and be as competitive as possible. Yeah, Anna, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, that's Justin Tucker. 16 accusers are accusing him at massage. What is it with massage tables? But at massage tables, being as crude and disgusting as Deshaun Watson was. Yeah, I don't want my team to tank either. The Saints just aren't going to do that. They're going to try and win as many games as possible. So the moves they're going to make, whatever moves they make, they're going to be making with the idea of trying to win. So if that means keeping Derek Carr and restructuring his deal, they're going to do that. That doesn't mean that's what they're going to do. That just means that's the plan. The plan is to win, and they'll figure out how to do that. So that probably means that you're looking at a 7-win team, maybe. So you can be picking around where you're picking right now next year. I don't know how I know a lot of people want Derek Carr to go. I just don't think financially they can afford to let him go. I just think it's too big, and I just spent a good 10 minutes on it. I just think it's too big of a contract right now that they can't afford to eat yet. They've got to wait a year at least to be able to eat his contract because we just talked about the $40 million in dead money. If you add another $30 million of dead money, that's just that much harder to get under the cap to sign anybody. And Rattler never won a game. That's a huge negative. If Rattler would have won a game, done a John Forcade, maybe won the last 3 games, then you could kind of say, like the 1990 Saints said, hey, we don't need Bobby Hebert. We don't need a Derek Carr. We can roll with John Forcade. We can roll with Rattler. We can do something like that. But Rattler never won a game. And that's a hell of a distinction, because in Saints history, if a quarterback had more than 3 starts, he's won at least 1 game in Saints history. And that includes guys like you never heard of, like Larry Sippa. The Billy Joes won at least 3 games. I won at least 1 game. Ed Hargett. I can go through all kinds of obscure Saints quarterbacks. Steve Walsh, Danny Werfel. They all won at least 1 game as a starter. Even Todd Bauman won at least 1 game as a starter. And you can't tell me that the Saints rosters, I just went on a tirade about the draft. The Saints roster from 1970 to 1977 were more talented than the Saints rosters in 2024. You got to be able to win 1 game. He averaged just 1 touchdown pass in every game he started. It's just not functional. I don't think Merkin started more than 1 game, though, Jimmy Gumbo. The only game I can think of where he started was the Washington Redskins game from 1982. It's like Mike Buck. Mike Buck only started 1 game. He didn't even finish that game. They yanked his ass. He was that bad. It was against the Philadelphia Eagles in 1993. Fans were screaming for Mike Buck because he threw a deep pass in 1991 against the Atlanta Falcons. And when he actually came out there and started, you realized how dumb he was. I'm sorry, Mike Buck will never be a guest on this show. But yeah, he could not comprehend the offense. So it's hard. I just didn't see anything from Rattler that makes me think that guy, if you gave him better players around him, is going to be any better, because it wasn't like, and this is the example I give. Okay. When a quarterback has got bad receivers, and this happened to Archie Manning and Bobby Douglas in 1977, you got bad receivers. You try throwing to bad receivers, they're dropping the passes. They're hitting them in the hands, they're hitting them in the numbers, they're dropping them. They're just terrible. Oh, I can so relate to this guy. That guy right there with the glasses. Me as a Saints fan, me in years. When you're playing with those kind of receivers that just aren't catching, or running backs that run into their blockers, that kind of stuff. And you can't tell me this offensive line was worse than the offensive lines Archie Manning played behind. But when you have those situations, then you can say, okay, it's a quarterback like Archie. He's talented, but he's behind a bunch of guys who have no business playing football. And that's not to say Rattler had good players to play with. He didn't. That's obvious. But what I'm saying is, what he was missing wide open receivers on dump offs. He was throwing the ball too hard, or he was throwing the ball in the dirt, or he was throwing the ball behind the receivers too high. All those things. And that's the part that bothers me, because I thought his passing mechanics were horrible. I just felt like if you're going to be a starting quarterback in the NFL, you've got to be able to complete passes when you have to complete them. And I just didn't see that out of him. What I saw instead was a guy who really looked unprepared from college. And it's partially because he had bad coaching in college. It's not his fault. He didn't get the coaching he needed in Oklahoma. He didn't get the coaching he needed, definitely get the coaching he needed in South Carolina. So he's a guy who needs, this is why I used to always argue for a developmental league, because he's definitely a guy that needs time in a developmental league like an NFL Europe. because that's where Jake Delhomme went. That's where Kurt Warner went. Players like him, Leroy Glover came from the NFL Europe. Guys get the reps, get the playing time that they need to become comfortable in the pocket, to start developing that touch, throw a catchable ball, learn how to be more accurate, work with a quarterback position coach who is going to work on your mechanics, your fundamental mechanics, your footwork, release point. Sometimes Rattler was like a jug machine that somebody just slapped and it just spun in circles. That ball was coming out any which way. And it's because he doesn't have a consistent release point. And unfortunately, because there is no developmental league, teams don't take the time to work with these guys. That's why Sam Darnold, 5 years or 7 years after he's drafted, Sam Darnold suddenly looks like an NFL quarterback with the Minnesota Vikings. But he looked terrible all those other years ahead of that. So that's if I want to make a change, rather than have a 17 or 18 game schedule, I want the NFL to invest in a developmental spring league. Put together another NFL Europe. Get with the UFL, whatever the hell it is called now, and turn that into a developmental league where these guys that are low round draft picks, the Zach Bonds even, can get out into a developmental league, and it doesn't take them 3 to 5 years and suddenly they take off and become an all-pro. They get the reps, they get the coaching, they get the starting opportunities when you're not in this compressed, we got to win every game. We can't afford to, if we lose 4 games, we're suddenly out, and especially 3 of them divisional games, we're suddenly out of the playoff picture. We can't risk putting these guys in until the season's gone. The season's useless. You want to have some kind of developmental league, and that's the thing. If I was commissioner for a day, that's the first thing I would do. But the league doesn't want to spend the money on it. They'd rather make money than spend money developing these players, because it's almost like we're back to Tex Schramm, the former Cowboys GM. Tex Schramm's mentality when it comes to the players. You guys are the cattle, we're the ranchers, and we can always get more cattle. Yeah, that's terrible. These kids have no chance. And I think you're going to see more and more of this now that the cap has been released, and you now have guys who are getting paid in college football and are playing 5 and 7 years and jumping from team to team to team because of the portal. They're not getting the coaching they need. They're shopping around till they can get on either a loaded roster, or they can be a big fish in a little pond and just inflate their stats, and they're not getting the coaches. That's what kills me. I think that's part of the problem with the league, because you've got a lot of kids out there who they're out of the league in 2 and 3 years because they don't get any chances. They just run out of chances, so they just run these kids out of here, and they become these whatever happened to players. And that's exactly how I feel. They keep wanting to send all these teams to England and Germany and everything else, play a regular season game. Instead of doing that, just bring back NFL Europe when they were all doing a game in Europe. That was great. That the Barcelona Dragons and the Rhine Fire and all those teams that I used to watch, that good spring football too. And it was quality football. It really was. And it didn't help everybody, but surely 2 Super Bowl quarterbacks in Kurt Warner and in Jake Delhomme, they got a lot of growth out of those leagues. Leroy Glover, arguably one of the best inside defensive players in Saints history, came out of that league. He got the reps he needed because he was undersized. He got the reps he needed. And it just, to me, it makes too much sense, but it costs money and the league won't do it. That's my rant for the evening. Okay, so the thing to look forward to for this week, Nussmeier will officially become named offensive coordinator, barring any late night changes. I do expect him to be named offensive coordinator. Brandon Staley, likely defensive coordinator. We'll probably see that at the end of the week. And I would expect all of his assistants to name even quicker. That's the other reason why I think Staley probably gets the job. One last thing I want to point out, though, about these coaching hires. Remember Sean Payton's first coaching staff? He had Gary Gibbs as defensive coordinator. He had a couple other guys who did not last very long with us. Because the Saints were so late in the process, I think that's part of the reason why Mickey Loomis has such a hand in naming. Because as Bob talked about in the beginning here, Kellen Moore has risen up the ranks so quickly. His Rolodex is not very big of assistants he could get a hold of. These guys that he probably knows have already gotten jobs. So if we're going to get a true Kellen Moore staff, we might have to wait a couple years for him to kind of filter through and get some of his own people in. That's not to say the hires that we're bringing in are bad. It's just we'll see how these go. These guys, I think, I'm looking at as temps that have to prove themselves. Kind of, they're on probation, and if they prove to be good hires and they do things like further develop Trevor Penning, there's another guy who probably could benefit from an NFL Europe, but develop Trevor Penning even further than he did this leap he did this past year. You start getting those guys and they start playing to their potential, then you'll see more of these coaches stick around longer. Kendre Miller, another guy I think would benefit from a developmental league, although his problem is he can't stay healthy. Strength and conditioning coaches too. We talk about special teams. I want to see who the strength and conditioning coaches are going to be because those are changing as well. In the meantime, thank you guys for sticking with us. I appreciate this. There was a lot of people on the show tonight. That's great. It just shows the excitement for a new coach. I hope we can carry this over to the season. In the meantime, we'll see you next time under the dome. Good night, everybody.